Welcome to the What If podcast. I'm Kate Wong, a growth strategist and operator in tech, part-time university faculty, and your podcast host. In each episode, I sit down with international women, third culture thinkers, and women building across cultures, careers, and continents. We talk about the choices we make, the risks we take, the pivots we navigate, and the moments that shape us into who we become. Behind every leap of faith, there's always one question at the heart of it all. What if? Joining us today is Victoria Lyu, a healthcare industry professional in the US and an international student from China. She's currently pursuing a joint MBA and an MS in Biomedical Science degree at the University of Chicago. Victoria's path has taken her across economic consulting, healthcare finance, and go-to-market strategies for women's health. But what really ties her journey together is her deep curiosity in the healthcare industry and a very intentional approach to career pivots. In our conversation, we talked about moments that led her to pause, to reflect, and to choose her next step with purpose, from exploring different corners of healthcare and pursuing a dual degree that sits right in the intersection of science and business. She's passionate about using her dual lens to accelerate new therapeutics and to help reshape the future of healthcare. And I'm super excited to share her story with you today. Let's dive in. Hi, Victoria. Welcome to the What If podcast. I'm super excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Kay. Really excited to dive into the conversation with you and super thankful for you to have me here.
Yeah, let's get started. For people who are hearing your story for the first time, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to the US?
So I actually grew up in China in a town called Hangzhou. It's in the south part of China, famous for having a West Lake in the middle of the city. And besides the natural sceneries, I love visiting growing up Leifengta and also Westlake. I also really appreciate my town for having a very robust technology scene. So it's known for building tech conglomerates like Alibaba, DeepSeek, and other tech companies. So I'm really proud to be someone who grew up in Hangzhou. And I think the reason I came to the US at a young age was because I was looking for a different education system that looks for candidates more holistically. I really love my school I went to in China, in Hangzhou specifically, but I think I was becoming more and more goal-oriented with having good grades only. And I wanted to explore different potential in my future. And I think education in the US will help me do that. And I also really love watching American TV show. As a young kid, I was a big fan of Hannah Montana and Victoria's. So I think coming to the US and also really loving my English class as a kid really were the inspirations behind that decision.
That's awesome. So it sounds like when you were a little kid, you've always wanted to come to the US, and you were immersed in a lot of US culture. But looking back, just in terms of your personalities, were you always exploring different paths? Were you always curious about things? Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I hope my answer doesn't shock you. I actually thought I was not a naughty kid. I was a very well-behaved kid. Like I am the
That's
parents'
great.
pet, basically. And then I, ironically, looking back, thought I was maybe a little bit too studious and maybe a little bit too nerdy because I was very much focused just on getting good grades, getting into good school. But I think, again, as I said in the previous answer, I think I focused too much on just getting good grades. And the education system I was in China was not able to allow me to shine in other areas that I was very interested in. So I think coming to the US was a very good decision because I pivoted from a boring, nerdy kid to someone who's very curious of like trying different things.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What a great, I guess, epiphany from being a kid that was really driven in academics to exploring different paths when you're a student in the US.
Yeah.
Moving on a little bit, let's talk a little bit about your career. What made you decided to join Deloitte after college?
Yeah, so I think it was a combination of different reasons. So, a little bit background I went to Boston College for undergrad. I majored in business with a minor in psychology. And the business school environment at BC was very interesting because the school has very strong resources and building pipeline to send candidates into consulting and to banking in different areas of financial services. And I think given financial services and also consulting were the two most popular industry, I was naturally encouraged to pursue those fields. And also as an international student, I had a lot of pressure of finding means to stay in the US. So naturally, I gravitated towards a big company and financial industry that will allow me to leverage a lot of skill sets I learned in undergrad, like financial modeling, accounting, to work for global clients. I also realized I'm a global citizen, so I really wanted to work for a global company that serves diverse clients. And so Deloitte was a very fabulous company in a way that allows me to get exposure to different clients from different countries in the Bay Area. And that's essentially the reason why I decided to make a first step there.
So, how was that experience for you as a fresh grad out of BC and trying to find your way in the US and landing your first job in Deloitte? What was it like?
I think it sounds very intimidating first, but I was very grateful. I had really good mentors, especially senior consultants who helped me a lot during my time as a baby consultant. So I really appreciate the level of mentorship and the great work culture we had, the team culture we had there. Something I really miss. And as we talk later in the story, I actually decided to go back to a similar type of work environment after booth and during the summer for my internship. And I think the type of environment was something I really miss and really enjoy having as my first job.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit more about what makes you interested in pursuing healthcare after, working in Deloitte. Was there a moment where you were able to get involved in some healthcare project? How did you get interested?
That's such a good question. And healthcare is subject that I love the most to talk about. So actually it didn't start after Deloitte. I realized I was somewhat interested in healthcare when I was a senior in college. So during COVID, like how schools were shutting down. And then uh, we were brought back to campus during my senior year at Boston College. And they started a new course taught by this lady who used to work in the marketing department of Apple called design thinking. So essentially, the design thinking was this class where the professor encouraged students to design a solution for a problem they saw on campus that was dear to their heart. So I've never spent any time at BC really thinking about, hey, what kind of problems I wanted to solve on campus because I was so focused on getting a job in the financial industry. So after a while, I realized a problem I was really interested in solving was actually to help female students who were struggling with menstrual cramps, right? Because I saw in the classes I was sitting in, a lot of friends or classmates were absent because they were suffering through severe cramps. And so I basically wrote a proposal in my presentation saying that perhaps the Women's Center at Boston College should start planning for some workshops that teach female students how to overcome the painful symptoms of cramps by teaching them the diet, a lot of the yoga exercise they can do during their menstrual cycle to overcome the painful symptoms. And I think that was a project that definitely was a pivotal moment in my life where I realized, wow, I'm kind of interested in women's health. But it was not until around 1 year into working at Deloitte that I saw the overturn of Roe v. Wade nationally. And I saw how, on national level, women's access to critical healthcare infrastructure were being restricted due to the political decision. And at that moment, I also became more curious to dive into the policy side of things. And I saw historically how we had a lack of clinical trials done on women and specifically collecting data from female participants to better understand symptoms affecting women differently versus men. And I think that whole experience made me realize, hey, I really want to pivot into healthcare because I am personally passionate about this cause and want to devote my time into improving the systematic issue I was seeing.
You can own your career and make it as much as your passion as possible. And it doesn't just have to be a career that follows a specific trajectory that your parents want you to do or what your school wants you to do. And I'm very inspired by that. Was
Thanks.
there a moment where you realized that, okay, this goes beyond just the passion? I actually wanted to take healthcare into something that I wanted to continue further in my life. And was there a time that you take to reflect on that decision and actually make the decision happen?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I think in my case, my senior capstone project for women's health actually became a lifelong commitment I want to devote myself to. So I definitely understand uh, how like people want to take a lot of time into contemplating whether that's the right path for them. So for me, I think my career was never a linear path. Just to give you more context, I'm currently doing a joint MBA and Master in Biomedical Science at Chicago booth. But before I enter booth, I work on 4 jobs during the 4 years before MBA. And that's very atypical because most of my friends and my classmates currently at Booth, they typically worked on 1 job or 2 jobs throughout the 5 to 7 years before Booth, or even longer than that. And they became a manager, but I was just like doing different things, trying out different hypotheses before that. And typically, those friends who stayed at the 1 or 2 jobs they had before Booth came to Booth to test different hypotheses. And I feel like I came to Booth already done with testing hypothesis with a clear understanding
Awesome.
of, okay, I want to do XYZ, right? So during the 4 years, just to give more context, 3 of the 4 years I worked at Deloitte and another financial institution, so big companies. And then I spent 7 months out of the 4 years testing 2 different career hypotheses, one in women's health tech startup and another one in VC. And I think this whole testing hypothesis made me realize I'm super interested in becoming an operator. I think financing for healthcare is very exciting, but I think I'm more interested in the strategic side of building and scaling business. So that was the conclusion of me testing different career hypotheses. But also, I realized while I was testing my hypothesis in the early stage startup that maybe in my current career stage that I want to focus on more mature stage of business rather than devoting myself to early stage of operations just because early stage health tech requires a lot of expertise in scaling business and also scientific understanding of the therapeutics you're trying to bring to the market. So I think that whole experience made me realize how important a business and a science degree is to me. So that also prompted me to come to U Chicago for my master experience.
Really love the mentality of experimenting and testing things until, you figure out which path to take. And I'm a big fan of that. I like to follow up on two questions before we dive into your MBA experience. You mentioned you were experimenting with different things and trying different things before going into an MBA degree. How did you decide to between all the jobs took a couple of months to reflect on the decisions that you're going to make?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for me, I want to know that I'm sure about a career path. And to do that, I think summer internship or fellowship was a way for me to figure if I want to be set on that career path. And I think, as I said, I did 2 things at different time period during that 7 month. And particularly before I started at Booth, I worked at the Women's House tech startup. So I think that was a very pivotal moment because I get the taste of what it's like to be an operator. And then knowing that if I want to be an operator for the long term, what kind of skill sets I need to gain at Booth. So, for example, one thing I realized was the US healthcare is very, very fragmented, and understanding how to scale business by understanding specific policy landscape in specific states are very important. So, for example, I realize the US healthcare ecosystem is really fragmented. So, I think at that moment, I realized I want to better understand from a policy standpoint how the US health system works. So, especially for certain services that need coverage for Medicaid, it's really good to have that understanding how to know how things work on a state level. So I think a lot of that is working and testing for the hypothesis and realize what skill sets I was missing, and then going back to B school and also to this biomedical science degree program to look for and gain the skill sets I thought I was lacking.
Sounds like you did a lot of self retrospection and self learning work to try to understand, what your passion is and what kind of problem you want to solve. That's very impressive.
Thank
Um,
you.
so, as someone who is fresh out of college and coming to you, Victoria, and asking you for your secret sauce and advice, unsure about what path to take, what's the smartest way for them to experiment? Do you have any advice?
Yeah, I do. So I think you can this down into a two-part process where the first part is a very thorough self-reflection, right? So I would literally just take a piece of paper and then put on meditation music and like think about what drives you, right? What are your motivations for things? And then for me, I'm a very mission-driven and purpose-driven person. If I don't see purpose in what I'm building and what I'm doing, I can't put myself into it. I can't put my 100% of myself into doing this. So I think it works for a lot of people who are similar to me, where you have to understand your values and what excites you. And after you narrow that down, you understand like what industry, what specific functions I want to work on. I remember a lot of the friends I met during college, they were super analytical. And then finance to them was not just about making returns, it's about like this intellectual rigor of analyzing business financially. So for them, that's what drives them. And then they understand, hey, I want to go into financial industry. So I think having that self-reflection process is super important. And the second part is I understand in college you have a lot of financial constraints. So definitely dig into the resources the school offers. I remember Boston College had a program where if you work for an unpaid internship, they will offer a stipend. So Boost also does very similar things. So I would definitely research those resources and look at whether you're eligible and your ideal internship will be eligible to apply for that. And also, lastly, if you're interested in like VC startup, I think a lot of the jobs are not posting their positions online. So it's a very self-driven process. So really do your thorough research and then do the outreach yourself on LinkedIn. Don't be afraid to knock on the door of some founders, some operators, because I think in the early stage startup ecosystem, everyone's very eager to meet people who are like-minded and who are also very passionate about the cause they're trying to improve and a business they're trying to build.
I really loved your advice, particularly on the piece where you just have to take advantage of all the resources that you have around you and make the best use of it. And going into any school or any programs or even, entering career, I think having a sense of purpose and, knowing why you're there is very important. And so thank you for your advice. And I hope that the audience are going to actively take action based on those. So
Yeah.
let's go into your MBA and Masters of Bioscience journey a little bit. How's that going so far for you? And what did you hope to get out of that experience?
Yeah, so I have been loving it so far. I think coming to U Chicago to do the joint degree in MBA and biomedical science has been one of the best decisions I ever made because it's exactly offering what I need at this stage of my life. But before I came to Boost, my primary goal is to bridge the gap between scientific discovery and commercial viability in the future. So I think this science and business dual degree would offer me the knowledge to specifically serve that role from lab to the boardroom. But I think the value specifically for me, because I did not study science in undergrad, I was a business degree with a somewhat science related minor. So I was hoping to gain very strong scientific substrate from this specific degree I was gaining. So the BMS biomedical science degree provides a very deep understanding in like disease pathology and also mechanics of clinical trials, which I deeply love. And I think also I really love the fact that my classes were taught by practicing physicians who can bring in real clinical cases from the patients they just saw in the morning. So I just felt like that perspective was so unique and something I would never be able to get in the life before Booth. And lastly, I would say, besides the scientific degree, the Booth degree has been offering me very valuable toolkit because it gives me this managerial toolkit I can always use, especially in finance, marketing, and other functions to address a lot of the difficult commercial challenges in the scientific ventures.
That sounds great. I know that besides schools and academics, did you do anything fun outside of academics?
Yeah, so I think my major involvements, okay, this sounds a little bit nerdy, but I am co-chairing healthcare group with some of my friends and a couple of other students who are also very passionate about healthcare. So we're putting together a conference and track to visit healthcare companies in the Bay Area of Boston next year. So that's something I'm very excited about because I feel like never in my life before Boost, I had a group of people who are as passionate as me in healthcare, and I was able to find that group of people at Booth. But also besides that, like I do a lot of tennis, so like I was able to find really good tennis buddies to hit with on the weekend, and just getting involved in different clubs and getting to know people from different cultures and from different professional backgrounds has been very refreshing.
It sounds like surrounding yourself with a bunch of people that are passionate on the same cause is very important for your career growth. And I'm happy
Yeah,
that you are able to get that experience at Booth.
yeah.
Yeah, we will go back to your tennis in a little bit. But I do wanted to ask a question. There's a lot of debate about this, as you know, in 2026. A lot of people will think that MBA or a graduate degree isn't necessary for succeeding in their career. What's your personal view in this, and what's the role of your MBA and MS degree to your career growth?
Yeah, I think the answer really depends on which industry you go into. At least how I felt in the Valley, people really don't care about you having an MBA unless you're like a founder or an entrepreneur. I think GSB and HBS will be really helpful. But for me, working in healthcare, I think there are a lot of values of having this MBA. And this dual degree. And 1 year into this program, I think I proved myself right in coming here. And I think the experience has been highly valuable. I would say the first reason is in the age of AI disruption, I think everyone's freaking out about losing their job, right? So I believe a dual degree is more valuable than ever because you demonstrate this uh, domain expertise in healthcare. And also, science is a very timeless subject, right? And the roles that interface with physician, whether you're commercializing or marketing your drugs or working with physicians or scientists on clinical trial, really require a level of scientific literacy or scientific credibility that a degree would really help you to demonstrate and validate. So that's the first big thing. I think you're future proving with AI using this joint
Yeah,
degree. Yeah.
knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power, yeah. And second is, I think, institutional recognition. So I think a lot of the traditional uh, industry players, they still love to hire MBA candidates for their leadership programs. So big pharma will come to Boost to hire for commercial leadership programs. They do heavily value MBA as a signal of leadership and strategic readiness for like high level corporate roles. So I do think that's very important. And another reason, the third reason I would say is a curation of a diverse network you not be able to get if you don't do an MBA. Because as I shared in the previous question, before I came to Booth, I do not feel like I have a robust now healthcare network. I worked in healthcare finance for a couple of years, and then my friends in LA and in the Bay are more focused on just pharma. And I think I only, including you, I had like you're like in the intersection between tech and healthcare. So like I only had
Yeah.
like I can count with 3 fingers. I only have like 3 friends who work in healthcare. So definitely not big enough for career pivot or growth. But now after a year, I can tell you like I have friends who are in the medical school doing MD, PhD. I have friends who are going to medical med tech. I have friends who are going into like pharma and different sectors of healthcare. And that I think that exposure is really valuable across different sides of the healthcare ecosystem because first of all, if you want to pivot, they're very valuable to give you advice. And second is healthcare is a very complex system. So whenever I'm in school doing like lunch and learn or like discussing healthcare topics and policy with friends, it's really refreshing to hear perspectives from different stakeholders within healthcare. And it's something I would not be able to get if I did not do the boost or this joint MBA MS degree. And I think again, the last closing thought I would have is I think the student bodies for 2 degrees are very different. So the biomedical science students, they are very much focused on clinical outcomes and patient level impact, where I think the MBA students, they also care about that. A lot of discussions we were having at business schools are focused more on business model, scalability. So I think being in between both worlds have really shown me where the divide is and then how different perspectives take place. And I'm really excited to get to hear from both sides doing this program.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that your experience would really inspire a lot of people who are thinking they want to do career pivoting and deciding whether MBA would be a good opportunity for them to do so. And maybe there are people who also was juggling between different passion and they wanted to use a degree as a way for them to try to understand what is the skill set that I'm lacking for this intersection that I am going in. And
Yeah.
so thanks for sharing that. So because this podcast is about international women and women who come from different places and different culture and they break boundaries to reach their goal. So as an international student, what kind of perspective does growing up between different cultures give you that others might not have?
Yeah, I think it's such an important question because international students, I think we go through a lot. Like we have to navigate through different cultures and different value systems, and we are always adjusting. And I think that gives us more skill sets and adaptability and empathy and understanding people's like their contacts, their values. And I think that's very important skill set in the workplace because when you're at workplace, you're navigating relationships with coworkers with different culture and their professional backgrounds. So it's important to have that level of empathy and adaptability. And personally, I spent the first 2 years spending with my time with a host family, who are Jewish host family. And I think there are a lot of values are very different from traditional Chinese family, but I found those values very exciting and something I tend to incorporate into my own value system as I grew older.
Cool.
So I really appreciate that.
What are some of the values that you incorporated from your homestay?
Yeah, I think a lot of this is like importance of like having family discussions. So, for example, I will remember in China, I was very goal oriented to get good grades. So sometimes I would just not talk during dinner and like not share how my day was. And then I just all watch TV the entire time. And my grandparents really spoiled me hard. So I think I was not having a lot of connections with my grandparents and my parents during school days on the weekdays. But I think my host family really tried to cultivate a strong connection within their family, where during dinner time they would be asked to share their day and just keep the entire family up to date with like how their day was. I thought that specific habit they had was very cute and something I do it with my husband now. Like while we were doing long distance. So like tell me about your day when
Yeah,
we're like meeting each other in person.
definitely. Communication is key for all kinds of relationship too. And I'm so happy that you're using that in your daily life too.
Yeah. I think with different relationships, like it takes a lot of maintenance and investing time into having quality conversations is always very valuable.
Yeah, of course. And people often talk about, the challenges that international students have. But what kind of advantage do you think that international students have in career searching in the US? And, now with the AI world, a lot of career searching might be different from what we had years ago. Can you share us a little bit more about the kind of advantage that you think international students have?
Yeah, I do think, as I shared previously, empathy and adaptability to different type of social environments is key because we did have to adjust to a new environment away from family at a young age if we came to the US at a young age. So I think those are the two key strands. But I also think the resilience, right? Because there's a unique hustle that comes from like navigating strict visa requirements, OPT, CPT, and then culture barriers and building new network and friend group from scratch that we owned. And by the time we're like doing like work conference meeting, we already actually solve a lot of life problems, like logistical problems as international students already. So I think that tenacity and that resilience are massive assets for international students because I think I'm not saying like we are more resilient or we're more tenacious than other like groups of domestic students, but uh, I think we went through a lot to get to where we are now, and then a lot of us are very resilient and very persistent with what we are trying to pursue, and that are really important traits to have to succeed in the career.
Totally. I couldn't agree more with the resilience and tenacity piece. And I personally think that being international in the US, for sure, we do have a lot of challenges, but we should lean onto the strength and advantage that we have and the experience that, shaped us into who we are.
Yeah.
So if you have to think big and have a magic wand for you to solve any problem in healthcare or women's health industry, what would you solve?
Yeah. For me, I'm still trying to figure out the lifelong commitment I want to devote myself to in the healthcare industry. But specifically, I'm very excited about the invention or innovation in immunotherapy to treat cancer. Uh, Instead of using chemotherapy as the standard of care, and especially potentially leading the usage of immunotherapy in women specific cancer. And I think that's a very important space and making sure trials thoroughly run and tested and optimized our female bodies to ensure efficacy and safety. Because I think, again, as I said, women's health is heavily underfunded and under researched. And I want more research and more therapies available to women.
That's awesome, and I can't wait for that day to come for
Yeah.
you and for us.
Yeah.
So to conclude this podcast, I do have a few quick questions that I am going to ask every guest on the What If podcast, and we love to understand how you're thinking. So the first question is, what is the biggest what if decision that you have made so far in your career or in your life?
Yeah. I think this connects to what I shared earlier. My first job was Deloitte. So leaving Deloitte to pursue my first hypothesis in women's health investing was a big what if because at that time, I think I'm seeing all my classmates getting promoted to senior consultants. And then I left the role without a promotion. I was like actually 1 or 2 months away from promotion. So like I think for me, it was a big financial and um, career risk to do that, but I know I need to do something I love and something that I felt was purpose driven. Um, so like I pursue that big what if there, but it turns out to be very valuable because it makes my future path really clear.
Definitely.
Yeah.
The next question is, what's a what if that you're so nervous to try, or the one that you're pushing yourself that you're going to try next?
Yeah. I think one thing I'm right now pushing myself to do is I'm pushing myself towards the side of healthcare that requires more scientific understanding, which is life science. So in the healthcare ecosystem, there's payer providers and also life sciences. And I think from this program, I realized I'm really interested in the biotech and life science side of the healthcare. And I think coming in, I thought I want to work in health services and payer provider side. And I think that this pivot I'm trying to make right now requires more understanding of technological complexity of drug development, and the knowledge barrier I'm trying to climb might feel a little bit intimidating, but I believe it's a very significant mountain to climb there because the view from the top is worth it. And the knowledge and the experience and the impact I want to bring specifically is really valuable because I want to be able to bring more therapeutics to the market, to patients.
That's all. And when you look 10 years ahead, what kind of world do you hope your generation would build for the society?
Yeah, so I am like really, really optimistic, and I want to say a very cliche answer. I would say I hope we can improve our health system globally and make it more accessible. And I want to see life-saving drugs can be cheaper to all types of populations and people on different types of insurance, including those on Medicaid and Medicare, and the payer system is more transparent and where high quality of medical care is not just a luxury, it's a standard of care people can access from anywhere.
That will be amazing. Before we wrap today, what's one thing that you would recommend to the audience? And this can be something that you're extremely passionate about, or something that you have just started doing, or a place that you're excited to travel to.
Yeah, I would say I picked up tennis again 2 years ago, and I have been loving it. I think playing tennis was another best decision I made in my life, not only because my husband is a big fan of tennis, so it's a really good sport to keep us connected as a couple and spend our
Yeah, and
weekends
I've played with
together.
you guys. You guys are really
Yeah.
great at playing tennis.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I would love to do doubles again. But I think tennis taught me a lot of life lessons about being persistent because in tennis, it's an interesting game because whenever I'm fixing a new stroke or a new grip, um, some something else is not working anymore. So like my grip and my skill sets for serve might be improving, but then my returns are decline. The skill sets for my returns are declining. So something is always improving at the cost of other areas. It's almost like life, right? You might excel in career, but then your friendships are taking a backseat. So it's teaching me a lot about life lessons and the importance of balancing different aspects of your life and making sure you're not just getting blindsided to improving one thing at a time, but making sure you have a holistic view of all areas of improvement and you're working on everything all together to maintain that balance.
That's very philosophical take on tennis, and I really love that priority of different life stages, right? Like maybe at this stage of our career, we're prioritizing, career growth. Maybe in the next phase of our career, you can prioritize family, but there's no regret and no guilt into taking any decision that we've made for ourselves. And I really love the lesson that tennis is taking you and yeah, I do hope that more audience are going to start playing tennis and being more intentional about everything that they do going forward.
Yeah, that's my hope. I think it's supposedly the healthiest sport for women's cardiovascular health. So I would heavily recommend people to, especially women, to go into
Yeah.
tennis or other racket sports.
Yeah, taking this from a healthcare industry professional. And I personally learned a ton from this episode and the conversation with you. And I'm really grateful that you're here to share us about your experience in MBA, in pivoting industry, and doing different things with an intention and passion. And I hope that the audience learned just as much as I do from this conversation. Thank you so much for joining What If Podcast and being our very first guest today.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. Always a good time with you. And hopefully it's a valuable lesson for your audience.
Thank you for tuning into the What If Podcast. If this episode makes you think, smile, or see things differently, do me a quick favor and share it with someone who might find it helpful too. Because what if one conversation could really change someone's next step? Don't forget to follow the show, and I can't wait to see you next time.